They say you never really know who someone is until you're forced to confront your assumptions. And in a quiet suburb of Georgia, that truth came crashing down like a thunderclap on a Tuesday morning when a man named Marcus Boyd pulled into the driveway of a sprawling colonial-style home with nothing but a clipboard, a delivery van, and a smile that could melt steel. He wasn't dressed in a suit, didn't arrive in a luxury car, and didn't carry himself like someone who owned half the block. But that's exactly what made what happened next so unforgettable. Marcus had just finalized the purchase of the property 2 days prior, a deal that had taken months of negotiation, legal wrangling, and quiet perseverance. But when he arrived to inspect the grounds and oversee the delivery of some new furniture, the neighborhood's illusion of civility shattered. A woman named Carol, who lived 2 doors down and had self-appointed herself as the unofficial gatekeeper of the cul-de-sac, spotted Marcus from her kitchen window and immediately dialed the HOA hotline, reporting a suspicious delivery man loitering near the Johnson property. Within minutes, 2 board members arrived, one in a golf cart, the other in a Lexus, and confronted Marcus with the kind of condescension that drips from decades of unchecked entitlement. "Sir, you're not allowed to be here," one of them barked, arms crossed, eyes narrowed. "This is private property. We've already called the police." Marcus blinked, stunned but composed, and calmly replied, "Actually, I own this property. I closed on it Monday." The silence that followed was thick enough to cut with a chainsaw. The board members exchanged glances, their expressions flickering between disbelief and discomfort. Carol had now stepped outside, arms folded, lips pursed, watching like a hawk circling prey. "That's impossible," she snapped. "The Johnsons would never sell to someone like you." Marcus raised an eyebrow, his voice steady. "Someone like me?" he asked, the question hanging in the air like a loaded gun. Carol hesitated, then muttered something about not recognizing him from the neighborhood, but the damage was done. The implication was clear. Marcus, a successful entrepreneur who had built a logistics company from scratch and recently expanded into real estate, had faced his share of coded language and veiled hostility, but this was different. This was direct. This was personal. And it was about to get worse. The police arrived within minutes, 2 cruisers, lights flashing, tires crunching against the gravel. Marcus stood his ground, presenting his ID, the deed, and the delivery paperwork. The officers, to their credit, were professional, but the tension was palpable. One officer asked Marcus to just hang tight, while they verified everything, and Marcus nodded, though the sting of being treated like a trespasser on his own property was impossible to ignore. Meanwhile, Carol had begun rallying other neighbors, whispering in hushed tones, pointing toward Marcus, spinning a narrative that painted him as an intruder, a scammer, someone who didn't belong. But Marcus did belong. He belonged more than any of them realized. The house wasn't just a new investment, it was a symbol. A symbol of everything he'd worked for, everything he'd overcome. Born in Birmingham, Alabama, Marcus had grown up in a neighborhood where opportunity was scarce and expectations were lower than the potholes in the street. His mother worked 2 jobs, his father disappeared before he turned 5, and by the time he was 16, Marcus was running deliveries for a local grocer just to help keep the lights on. He didn't have connections, didn't have privilege, but he had grit. And grit, as it turns out, is a powerful currency. By 25, Marcus had launched his own courier service, starting with 1 van and a dream. He built relationships, earned trust, and slowly expanded his fleet. By 32, he was servicing contracts for major retailers, and by 35, he was investing in property. The house in Georgia was his latest acquisition, a 5-bedroom, 3-bath beauty with a wraparound porch and a backyard big enough to host family reunions. But none of that mattered to Carol and her cohort. To them, Marcus was a delivery man. A black man in a hoodie. A stranger. And strangers in their world were threats. As the officers confirmed Marcus's ownership and began wrapping up the call, Carol stepped forward, her voice rising. "There must be some mistake," she insisted. "He doesn't look like someone who owns a house like this." One officer turned to her, visibly annoyed. "Ma'am, he owns the property. It's all verified. There's no issue here." But Carol wouldn't let it go. "I want to speak to the HOA president," she demanded. "This needs to be investigated." Marcus, who had remained calm throughout, finally spoke with quiet authority. "You know what's funny?" he said. "I met with the HOA last week. They approved the sale. I'm actually scheduled to attend the next board meeting." Carol's face drained of color. The realization was setting in, but denial is a powerful drug. She turned and stormed off, muttering under her breath, while the other neighbors began to disperse, some avoiding eye contact, others offering awkward nods. Marcus watched them go, his heart heavy but his resolve intact. He knew this wouldn't be the last time he'd face resistance. But he also knew he wasn't going anywhere. As the delivery crew began unloading the furniture, Marcus walked through the front door of his new home, the keys still warm in his pocket, and took a deep breath. The air smelled like fresh paint and possibility. But just as he began to relax, his phone buzzed. It was a message from his realtor. Urgent, call me ASAP. There's been a development with the HOA. Marcus frowned, stepping outside again, the sun casting long shadows across the lawn. He dialed the number and the voice on the other end was tense. Marcus, the realtor said, I don't know how to tell you this, but the HOA is trying to reverse the sale. They're claiming there was a procedural error. They're calling an emergency meeting tonight. Marcus's grip tightened around the phone. What kind of error? He asked. They're saying the board didn't have quorum when they approved the sale. That the vote wasn't valid. They're trying to nullify the purchase. Marcus stood there stunned. The house he just moved into, the house he legally owned, was suddenly in jeopardy. And the people who had smiled through the paperwork were now sharpening their knives. He looked back at the house, then at the neighbors who were still watching from behind curtains and hedges. This wasn't just about property. This was about power. About perception. About who gets to belong. And Marcus wasn't about to back down. He hung up the phone, squared his shoulders, and walked back inside. But what he didn't know, what no one knew, was that Carol had a secret. A secret that could unravel everything. And she was about to use it. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more powerful stories that uplift Black voices and expose hidden truths. Marcus didn't sleep that night, not because he was afraid but because he was calculating. Every move, every word, every glance from the HOA board had been a signal, and he knew how to read signals. He'd built his business by decoding the unspoken language of gatekeepers, and this neighborhood was no different. The emergency meeting was scheduled for 7 p.m. sharp at the community clubhouse, a building that looked like a country club but operated more like a fortress of exclusion. Marcus arrived early, dressed in a tailored navy suit, no clipboard this time, no delivery van, just presence. The room was already buzzing when he walked in. Carol was there, of course, seated at the front like a queen on a throne, flanked by two board members who looked like they'd stepped out of a 1980s country club catalog. The HOA president, a man named Richard Langston, cleared his throat and called the meeting to order. We're here to discuss the procedural irregularities surrounding the sale of 14 Sycamore Lane, he said, avoiding Marcus's gaze. There are concerns that the vote to approve the sale was conducted without proper quorum, and therefore may be invalid. Marcus raised his hand. With respect, I have a signed deed, a closing statement, and legal documentation confirming the sale. This isn't a debate, it's a fact. Richard shifted uncomfortably. We're not disputing that paperwork exists. We're questioning whether the board acted within its authority. Carol chimed in, her voice sharp. This is about preserving the integrity of our community. We have standards, traditions. Marcus leaned forward. Let me guess, those standards don't include people who look like me? Gasps rippled through the room. Carol's face flushed. That's not what I meant, she snapped. Then say what you meant, Marcus replied, his voice low but firm. Richard banged the gavel. Let's keep this civil. But civility was a mask, and Marcus had seen behind it. The meeting dragged on for over an hour, with Carol presenting a binder full of bylaws, amendments, and obscure clauses that she claimed invalidated the sale. Marcus countered with legal precedent, state property law, and a quiet confidence that unnerved them. But then, just as the board seemed ready to concede, Carol dropped her bombshell. I have a letter, she said, holding up a folded piece of paper. From the original owners, the Johnsons. It states that they were misled during the sale process. That they didn't know who the buyer was. Marcus's jaw tightened. That's a lie, he said. I met with them. We spoke at length. They were thrilled to sell. Carol smiled, but it wasn't warm. Well, they've changed their minds. Richard took the letter, scanned it, and frowned. This complicates things, he muttered. Marcus stood. You can't undo a legal sale because of buyer's remorse or prejudice. Richard hesitated. "We'll need to consult legal counsel." The meeting adjourned with no resolution, but Marcus knew the battle had just begun. Over the next week, strange things started happening. His mail was misdelivered. His trash bins disappeared. A landscaping crew showed up unannounced and began trimming his hedges without permission. When he confronted them, they claimed the HOA had ordered it. Marcus documented everything: photos, timestamps, witness statements. He wasn't just defending his home, he was building a case. But the real turning point came when he received an anonymous envelope in his mailbox. Inside was a USB drive and a note. "You need to see this. Carol isn't who she says she is." Marcus plugged the drive into his laptop and opened the single video file. It was grainy, clearly shot from a hidden camera, and showed Carol in a heated conversation with Richard. "I don't care what the law says," she hissed. "We're not letting him stay. I'll dig up whatever I have to. I'll make sure he regrets ever stepping foot in this neighborhood." Richard looked nervous. "If this gets out, it won't," Carol snapped. "Unless someone talks." Marcus sat back stunned. This wasn't just bias, it was conspiracy. He forwarded the video to his attorney, who immediately began drafting a formal complaint. But before Marcus could act, the power in his house went out. Not just a flicker, a full blackout. He stepped outside and saw that the entire street was lit, except his home. He called the utility company. They had no record of an outage. In fact, they said his account had been flagged for unauthorized occupancy. Marcus's blood ran cold. Someone had tampered with his records. He drove to the utility office the next morning and demanded answers. After hours of digging, a supervisor finally found the source of the flag. A request submitted by the HOA, claiming the property was vacant and under dispute. Marcus was furious. He returned home, determined to confront the board, but when he arrived he found a notice taped to his front door. "Pending investigation, this property is considered non-compliant with HOA standards. Occupancy is suspended." Marcus tore the notice down, heart pounding. This was war. But just as he stepped inside, his phone rang. It was his attorney. "Marcus," she said, her voice urgent. "We have a problem. That video you sent, it's gone. The file was wiped from our system. And the backup server was breached." Marcus froze. "What do you mean gone?" "I mean someone hacked us. And there's more. I just got a call from a contact at the county clerk's office. Carol filed a motion to freeze the deed. She's claiming the sale was fraudulent." Marcus felt the walls closing in. He was being erased, systematically, strategically. And then, as he stood in the silence of his darkened home, his phone buzzed again. Another anonymous message. This time it was a photo. A photo of Marcus's childhood home in Birmingham. Burned to the ground. The caption read, "History repeats. Unless you disappear." Marcus stared at the screen, heart racing. This wasn't just about property anymore. It was personal. Someone had gone deep into his past. And the next move would be deadly. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more powerful stories that uplift Black voices and expose hidden truths. Marcus didn't flinch when he saw the photo of his childhood home in flames. He stared at it like a man staring down a ghost, because that house wasn't just wood and brick, it was memory, it was struggle, it was the place where he learned how to survive. And now someone had reached into his past and twisted it into a threat. He forwarded the image to his attorney, who immediately flagged it as harassment, but Marcus knew this wasn't just intimidation, it was a message. Someone had done their homework. Someone wanted him gone. The next morning, Marcus drove to the county clerk's office to confirm the motion Carol had filed. The clerk, a young woman with tired eyes and a cautious tone, pulled up the record and nodded. "It's real," she said. "Filed under emergency review. They're trying to freeze the deed pending investigation." Marcus leaned in. "On what grounds?" She hesitated. "They're claiming the original owners were coerced. That the sale was manipulated." Marcus exhaled slowly. "That's a lie." The clerk nodded. "I know. But they've got influence. And they've hired a private investigator." Marcus's stomach turned. He left the office and drove straight to the Johnsons' old residence, hoping to speak with them directly, but the house was empty. A neighbor said they'd moved out of state 2 days after the sale. No forwarding address. No phone number. Just gone. Marcus returned home to find a strange car parked in front of his driveway, A black SUV with tinted windows. As he approached, the window rolled down and a man in a gray suit stepped out. "Mr. Boyd," he said, flashing a badge. "I'm with the HOA's legal counsel. We need to talk." Marcus folded his arms. "I've already spoken to my attorney." The man nodded. "This isn't about legalities. It's about resolution. Carol wants to offer a settlement." Marcus blinked. "A settlement?" "She's willing to buy the house back. At a premium. No questions asked." Marcus laughed, but it wasn't a joyful sound. "Let me guess, she wants me out quietly." The man didn't respond. Marcus stepped closer. "Tell Carol I'm not for sale. And neither is my dignity." The man sighed, returned to his SUV and drove off. That night, Marcus received another anonymous message, this time a video. It showed Carol in a meeting with a man Marcus didn't recognize, but the audio was clear. "We need to bury him," she said. "Find something. Anything. I don't care if it's real." The man nodded. "I've got contacts in Birmingham. We'll dig." Marcus felt the heat rise in his chest. They were going after his past. His family. His reputation. He called his mother, who still lived in Alabama, and warned her to be careful. She told him not to worry, but Marcus knew better. The next day, Marcus received a letter from the HOA, official notice of a disciplinary hearing. They were accusing him of violating community standards, citing unauthorized modifications to the property. The modifications? A new mailbox and a security camera. Marcus showed the letter to his attorney, who shook her head. "They're grasping at straws. But they're building a paper trail." Marcus decided to fight fire with fire. He hired his own investigator, a retired FBI agent named Lena Cruz, who had a reputation for uncovering buried truths. Lena got to work immediately, digging into Carol's background, the HOA's finances, and the sale records. Within days she found something. Carol had a sealed court record from 15 years ago, something involving real estate fraud. Lena couldn't access the full file, but she found enough to raise questions. Marcus confronted Richard at the next HOA meeting. "Tell me, Richard," he said, "how well do you know Carol?" Richard looked uneasy. "She's been on the board for years." "Did you know she was investigated for fraud?" Gasps echoed through the room. Carol stood up, furious. "That's a lie." Marcus held up Lena's report. "Then explain this." Richard grabbed the paper, scanned it, and paled. Carol snatched it from his hands and tore it in half. "This is harassment," she shouted. "You don't belong here." Marcus stepped forward. "I belong wherever I choose to build. And I'm not leaving." The room erupted in chaos. Some neighbors defended Marcus. Others sided with Carol. The meeting ended in shouting, and Marcus returned home exhausted but resolute. That night Lena called. "I found something else," she said. "Carol's not just trying to push you out. She's hiding something big. Something connected to the Johnsons." Marcus sat up. "What do you mean?" "The Johnsons didn't just move. They were paid to disappear." Marcus's heart stopped. "By who?" Lena hesitated. "I don't know yet. But I'm close." The next morning, Marcus woke to find his front lawn vandalized. Spray paint across the porch. "Get out." He called the police, filed a report, and installed more cameras. But the message was clear. They were escalating. Lena called again that afternoon. "I traced the payment to a shell company. Guess who's listed as the founder?" Marcus didn't speak. Lena whispered, "Carol?" Marcus clenched his fists. "She paid them off. To fake a complaint. To sabotage the sale." Lena nodded. "And there's more. I found a second shell company. It owns several properties in this neighborhood, including the one next door to you." Marcus's eyes widened. "She's buying up the block." "Exactly," Lena said. "And she's laundering it through HOA funds." Marcus felt the pieces falling into place. This wasn't just racism. It was corruption. A power play. A land grab. And he was the obstacle. That night, Marcus prepared a dossier, documents, videos, financial records, and sent it to a local journalist. He knew the story needed to go public. But just as he hit send, his phone rang. It was Lena. Her voice was trembling. "Marcus, I've been followed. Someone broke into my office. They took everything." Marcus froze. "Are you safe?" "For now. But listen, Before they wiped my files, I found one last thing. Carol's not working alone. Who is it? Marcus asked. Lena whispered, it's someone on the city council. Someone powerful. And they've just filed a motion to seize your property under eminent domain. Marcus's blood ran cold. They're trying to take my house. Lena's voice cracked. And they might succeed, unless we expose them now. Marcus stared out the window, the shadows growing longer. He knew what he had to do. But what he didn't know, what no one knew, was that Carol had just made her final move. And it wasn't legal. It was lethal. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more powerful stories that uplift Black voices and expose hidden truths. Marcus didn't sleep again, not because he couldn't, but because he refused to. Sleep was a luxury he couldn't afford when the walls were closing in and the enemy was no longer just Carol or the HOA. It was the city itself. Eminent domain. The phrase echoed in his mind like a siren. A legal maneuver designed to seize private property for public use, but in this case, it was being twisted into a weapon. Marcus paced the floor of his home, the house he'd fought for, the house he'd earned, and now the house they were trying to steal. Lena's voice still rang in his ears. Someone on the city council is involved. That meant this wasn't just a neighborhood dispute, it was systemic. Coordinated. Dangerous. Marcus met with Lena the next morning in a quiet diner off the highway, far from prying eyes. She slid a folder across the table. Inside were documents, bank transfers, shell company registrations, emails. Carol's been laundering money through HOA dues, Lena said. And the council member, his name is Gerald Whitmore, he's been approving zoning changes that benefit her real estate portfolio. Marcus scanned the papers, his jaw tightening. They're trying to flip this neighborhood. Push out anyone who doesn't fit their mold. Lena nodded. And you're the test case. If they can erase you, they can erase anyone. Marcus leaned back thinking. We need to go public. Now. Lena hesitated. There's one more thing. I found a sealed deposition from a whistleblower, someone who worked for Carol years ago. It mentions threats, blackmail, even sabotage. Marcus's eyes narrowed. Can we find them? Lena shook her head. They vanished. No trace. Marcus felt the weight of it all pressing down, but he wasn't backing down. He returned home and began preparing for war. He contacted the journalist he'd spoken to earlier, handed over the full dossier, and scheduled an interview. He wanted the world to see what was happening, not just to him but to communities like his all across the country. That night the story broke. Local HOA accused of corruption, racism, and fraud in property dispute. The article went viral. Social media lit up. News vans parked outside Marcus's home. Neighbors who had once avoided eye contact now offered quiet nods of support. But Carol wasn't finished. The next morning Marcus received a summons. He was being sued for defamation. Carol claimed the article had damaged her reputation and business interests. Marcus's attorney laughed. She's panicking. This is a distraction. But Marcus knew better. Carol didn't panic, she plotted. And sure enough, Lena called later that day with a chilling update. Marcus, she said, I just got access to a restricted file. Gerald Whitmore isn't just helping Carol, he's her brother. Marcus froze. Her brother? Half-brother. Different last name. But they've been working together for years. This goes deeper than we thought. Marcus felt the ground shift beneath him. Family ties. Political power. Financial corruption. It was a web and he was caught in the center. That night, Marcus held a press conference on his front lawn. Cameras rolled. Reporters asked questions. He spoke with clarity, conviction, and fire. This isn't just about me, he said. It's about every person who's ever been told they don't belong. Every homeowner who's been bullied, every neighbor who's been silenced. I'm not leaving. I'm not backing down. And I'm not afraid. The crowd erupted in applause. But as the cameras packed up and the night grew quiet, Marcus received one final message. No sender. No subject. Just a video. He clicked play. It showed Lena, tied to a chair, bruised, bloodied, in a dimly lit room. A voice off camera spoke coldly. You should have walked away, Marcus. Now she pays the price. Marcus's heart stopped. The screen went black. And then a second message appeared. You have 24 hours. Leave the house or she disappears forever. Marcus didn't hesitate. The moment he saw Lena in that video, Bound, bruised, threatened, something inside him snapped. Not in rage but in clarity. This wasn't just about property anymore. It was about justice. About standing up when the system expects you to fold. He called his attorney, the journalist, and the police, all within minutes. The video was traced to a burner account, but Lena's phone pinged once, briefly, from an abandoned warehouse on the edge of town. Marcus drove there himself, flanked by 2 officers and a local news crew who had caught wind of the story and refused to let it die in silence. The warehouse was dark, silent, and smelled of rust and secrets. They found Lena in the back room, shaken but alive, her hands still bound, her spirit unbroken. She looked up at Marcus and whispered, "They thought fear would silence us." Marcus helped her up, and the officers swept the building. No sign of Carol. No sign of Gerald Whitmore. But they had left behind something even more damning. A laptop, still open, filled with emails, financial records, and a blueprint for a neighborhood-wide land grab. The evidence was overwhelming. Within 48 hours the story exploded. National outlets picked it up. Carol and Gerald were named in a federal investigation. The HOA was dissolved. Gerald resigned from the city council under pressure. And Marcus? Marcus became a symbol. Not of victimhood, but of resistance. Of dignity. Of what happens when you refuse to be erased. He rebuilt his home brick by brick, soul by soul. Neighbors who once watched him with suspicion now greeted him with warmth. Lena recovered and joined Marcus in launching a nonprofit dedicated to protecting homeowners from HOA abuse and racial discrimination. They called it the Boyd Foundation. But the final twist came quietly. One evening Marcus received a letter, handwritten, no return address. Inside was a note, "You won. But this isn't over. There are more of us. And we don't forget." Marcus read it once, then burned it. Because he knew the truth. The fight never ends. But neither does the will to stand. And as he sat on his porch, watching the sun dip below the horizon, he smiled, not because the battle was easy, but because he never let them take his voice. Prejudice thrives in silence, and power often hides behind polished smiles and bylaws. But when one person stands up, armed with truth, resilience, and the refusal to be diminished, it forces the world to reckon with its shadows. Marcus's story reminds us that ownership isn't just about deeds and titles. It's about claiming space, demanding respect, and rewriting the narrative when others try to erase you. The moral is simple: never let anyone define your worth by their comfort. Belonging isn't granted, it's claimed. The end. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more powerful stories that uplift Black voices and expose hidden truths.